You're fired. Hi, this is Jim Gibson with Business Sense Podcast. Thank you for listening today. And I'm sure most of us has heard those words in one form or another over the years. I remember the first time I heard that, I was 16 years old working for a fast food joint, and I decided that I would set my own hours. Who was the boss to tell me I had to be there 8 o'clock? Sometimes I needed extra sleep. Well, he didn't put up with that very long, and I was fired. And I learned a lesson that day that when you work for someone, and they get to dictate when you show up and when you leave and some other rules. But we've all been fired, or at least a majority of people have been fired at one time or another. And I want to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me many years ago. I was hired as a consultant manager, so I not only did consulting, but I also managed the IT department that was responsible for an inbound center. Now, an inbound center is what you call, when you call a company and you have a problem with their products and they say, all representatives are really busy right now, so stay on the line and we really love you and we appreciate the fact that you're a customer. And then you hear music and then every once in a while they say, yeah, we're still really busy. Please stay on the line. Thank you for your business and you have a nice day. And they keep on doing that, and then eventually someone answers and says, how may I help you? Well, that's an inbound center. It's very complex sometimes. There's special software. It interacts with the computer network to bring the right screen up to the right person at the right time so they can talk to you intelligently about your product or whatever else. But it's involved. So I was asked to manage this. I was asked to organize it. I was asked to train the employees who actually worked for the company on how to run and manage this type of system. But I also had other contract work that I had to attend to on occasion, and I let my boss know, the CIO, Chief Information Officer of this huge company that I know you would know who they are if I said the name. I told him I had to be out of town for a couple days, out of state actually for a couple days, and that I would return and be back on a Monday or something. This was back in the 80s. I went out of town and I got a phone call. I guess I was out of town for about a day or two, and I got a phone call from one of those employees that worked for me, and he said, hey, Jim, I just want to let you know that we're doing a major upgrade today. And I said, what? Major upgrade today? What are you talking about? I never heard this. And he said, well, the CIO approved it, and he said it was something was going to happen. He talked to the manufacturer this morning, and he decided today would be a good day to do the upgrade. And I said, no software upgrade in the middle of a work day or with employees there, things like that. We're not going to do this. This is crazy. And I said, do we have a good backup? What happens if it fails? Murphy rules on these things. So anything that can happen, anything bad that can happen will happen. And that's how you have to plan. And I said, this is something that you got to really research, and it takes a couple weeks to make sure that you're doing the proper upgrade, that you even need this software upgrade. And what is it going to do for you? And how is it going to affect your system? We're not talking about a PC sitting on your desk. One little tiny PC not attached to a network or something like that. When you're talking to something that, you got a couple, 1,000, maybe 2,000 employees attached to. There was a lot of employees, plus a very complex inbound center with reporting, and that's attached to your computer network, and everything else has to communicate with your computer network. I said, this is really involved. You just don't do this on a whim. You don't decide at 10 o'clock in the morning, do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and not have everyone informed ahead of time to make sure you have proper planning. So I imagined that my boss didn't understand. So can I get a hold of the boss? Well, no, he left on vacation. So I canceled it. And of course, when he came back, he didn't renew my contract. It was up for a contract at 2 weeks ago, and he did not renew my contract. So pretty much he fired me, which was okay. I understand. He gave an order that it was to be updated that day, and I thought I was protecting him, and that if I could only talk to him, if he really knew the levity of the situation, he would not have decided to do that type of upgrade, even though the manufacturer said, no problem, it will work. Of course, the manufacturer doesn't have to pay the bill when people sit around idle. But needless to say, my contract was not renewed, and it was up that week. I think I had 2 weeks left on the contract at that point, little after Thanksgiving that year, and it was not renewed. So I understood. No problem. That's life. People get fired. I got fired. I think I did the right thing. I didn't know any other way to do it. But I'm going to tell you the rest of the story at the end. You got to stay tuned, man. It has a very interesting conclusion. Please pay attention. Stay tuned. Well, I know anytime you're fired, laid off, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes it's for cause, sometimes it's not. Company is downsizing and you got downsized, anything else. But, you walk home that day with that little banker box with all your stuff in it. And you tell your wife, and it's a pretty stressful time. It's stressful for you, stressful for your wife or your spouse if it's the other way around. It's just a tough time. It's an emotional time. To me, it's sometimes, it happened to me once or twice in my adult life. When it happens, it's sort of like losing a good friend who died. It's that stressful. At least it was for me. And I remember the feelings, and it was not a happy time. You got this mortgage. You got car payments, you got to buy food, you got a severance check, but that doesn't last very long, and the future is unknown. So what do I do now? What did I do wrong? It's that boss. He's a jerk and everything else. And as I said in other podcasts, take responsibility for yourself. So you worked for the jerk and didn't look for a new job ahead of time? You should have, and I should have. So I'm preaching not only to myself, but I'm preaching to you. So, to make a long story short, just take an inventory of yourself. Why was I fired? Honestly, look at it. Just don't blame your boss. Don't blame the company you worked for. Maybe they had good reasons to let you go. Maybe not. Maybe the boss was a jerk, like I said. But maybe they had good cause to let you go. Maybe there was a reason. And you need to take a honest look at yourself. Why was I fired? Did I mouth off to the boss? Did I do this? Did I steal? People steal and they wonder why they got fired. It's interesting that sometimes when I'd let people go, they would always look me in the eye and say, this company could not survive without me. Well, we've always survived without them. And sometimes, it was sad that I had to let people go when business couldn't support it, things like that. But do an inventory on yourself. Take responsibility for what happened. Do an inventory on yourself. Even if you believe it wasn't your fault, take responsibility. Start looking at yourself. How can you do better? Maybe you need to go back to school. Now, I did a podcast on the difference between an education and a degree. And sometimes you don't need a degree. You don't have to commit to a 4-year college type of thing. But just going back and learning. Now, this podcast is basically for people who are in IT. So if you're in IT, maybe you need to look at some of the certifications. Do you have certifications? Now, I've heard over and over again people say to me things like, well, I really know the system. I don't have the certification. You know something? That's hogwash. If I'm an employee and I'm going to hire you, you show me the certification. That tells me that the manufacturer says you know the system. That's someone who actually certifies that you should be able to get in there and program that system. And if you're talking about Cisco, man, they're tough. They're tough certifications. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have any money for certification. I can't afford the book, things like that. I need help. Well, you got to be kidding, man. You spend money based on your priorities. So if you think something's important, you're going to spend money on it. And in this case, if you're unemployed, you need to go and look to see if you got the proper certifications to get a job. And even after you get that next job, you should be saying, all jobs are temporary. And so I need a better job. Or if I can earn more, per year, this would be better. And the way you're going to earn more is not only experience, but also education. And again, I don't necessarily mean a 4-year degree. What I mean by that is education as far as certifications. In the IT field, certifications are a lot more valuable today, in my opinion. You learn a lot more of the details without wasting your time and money on nonsense stuff. And that doesn't mean you can't get the certifications at a local college. You can. Go to college, get trained, everything else, but you still got to take the test. I talk about this in other podcasts, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But the idea is start working on yourself. Always be working on yourself. I own businesses, and I still spend time studying and studying and studying and learning new things because this is an interesting field to be in. Maybe you're in the wrong field. Maybe you shouldn't be in IT. Maybe you should be in another field. You got to start checking to see where is your interest at. I mean, I find IT extremely interesting. I like everything about IT. I like to learn about everything there is in IT. So I'm always learning, I'm always reading, I'm always studying and things like that. And if you're not interested in IT, find what you're interested in and start putting your effort in that area. That's first of all. Secondly, if you're out of work right now, then you should consider that your new job, to find a job. And so start looking, work on your resume. If you got to build a new resume, go on YouTube. There's a lot of people that tell you how to write a resume, things like that. Make sure you have a LinkedIn account. This should be your full-time job, looking for a job. You should be spending 8 hours a day. But I know you can't spend all day just looking for a job, right? So work on your certification at night or in the morning before you start your search for a job. But this shouldn't be time to kick back and watch TV and to relax and everything else. You have to find a job. You have to realize certifications are important in finding a new job. So after you did a self-evaluation, after you decided you have a plan, everything else, exercise the plan. I'm positive that you'll find a job. I've never been laid off on a job or fired or whatever else where I didn't learn something new and valuable. I learned something new about myself, and I learned something new about life. And I always end up with a better situation afterwards. It has always been that way. I did not ever badmouth a former employer because it will always come back to you. Anyway, the conclusion that I promised you concerning being fired or not extending my contract for an inbound center and there at that big corporation up in Orange County, California. Well, as I said, it was a couple weeks after Thanksgiving or a week after Thanksgiving that all this happened. I'm old enough to know that the world doesn't come to an end when you're fired. It's just the beginning of something new. But I did receive a phone call after Christmas. I don't remember the exact day after Christmas, but it was one of my former technicians, one of the technicians that were still at the company there. And he knew me, and he had my personal phone number, and he called up and he said, Jim, you got to help us. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. What's up? And he says, well, the system's down. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, so how can I help you? What advice can I give you? And he says, well, we're down, everything else. We did that software update, and pretty much it happened just like you said it happened. Everything fell apart. It did not work and things like that. And I said, well, okay, that's not a big deal. Walk it back. They must have a way to, go from one software upgrade, walk it back to the last one. He said, no, they didn't have a plan. And I said, oh, okay. Well, they should. That's something we should have investigated before we did it. You can't walk it back. I said, okay, well, just reload the old software up, before you did the update. Reload that into the system and then run the backup, the data backup on it. He came back and he said, we did that and the data backup is corrupted and it won't work. What do we do? And I said, well, how long you been down? And he says, I've been down for 3 days. Wow, 3 days you've been down? You're going to have to reprogram that whole system from scratch. Well, to make a long story short, and I am not happy about this, but I am sad to hear that I'm sure that CIO lost his job. This is almost inexcusable for someone that knows IT. On a big system, you just don't throw in a whole system upgrade without a plan B, C, D, E, F at that point. That company lost millions and millions of dollars. And I'm sure if I went back to the new CIO and told him what I did and all, I would probably have a new contract with that company. But I did not. I was moving on to other things. I just want to tell you, I've been there before. If you're out looking for a job right now, I've been there before. And there is hope. Now you just have to think through what you plan to do in the future. You have to be proactive. You can't wait for things to happen. You have to make them happen. But you will find another job. And for me, I always found a better job. I always got higher pay. I always got a better job somewhere else. And I learned a lot each time it happened to me. It's just part of life, man. It happens. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. I do appreciate it. If you're listening to this on YouTube, my podcast on YouTube, then please subscribe, please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Please make a comment. Also, if you notice on YouTube in the description, we have a thing called Subscribe Star. Subscribe Star is a way that you can support my podcasts and my videos. And what you do is you click on that and you can donate some funds, and I'd really appreciate it. So if you appreciate these podcasts, you appreciate some of these other videos on YouTube, CableSupply.com on YouTube, well then please support me on it. I'd appreciate it. At least consider supporting me on this. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Again, this is Jim Gibson with business sense, and you have a great day.